Fiance's on the floor with blood everywhere. Please come, help, now. Oh no, oh no.
On January 26, 2011, a 911 call came in from a Philadelphia apartment. The caller said his fiance was unresponsive on the kitchen floor, and by the time paramedics arrived, she was dead, with a knife still in her chest. The medical examiner ruled it a homicide, but 10 weeks later, with no physical evidence, they changed it to self-inflicted. We went to the public. We asked the people who's followed this case for years what they needed answered. And the same three questions just kept coming back, John. Today, we're going to answer every one of them. We're going to make an attempt to anyway. But let's start with the call that set everything in motion, because every good true crime story starts with a 911 call. This one has a lot to tell us. Go ahead and play it.
Help, I need a murder. Out. I just walked into my apartment. My fiance's on the floor with blood everywhere.
What is the address?
4601 Flat Rock Road. Please come, help, now.
4601
Flat Rock Road.
Is this a house or apartment?
Oh no, oh no. It's an apartment. Please hurry, please.
Where is she bleeding from?
I don't know. I can't tell.
No, sir, you have to calm yourself down in order to get you some help.
I'm sorry. Okay. I don't know. I'm looking at her right now. I can't see anything. There's nothing broken. She's bleeding. Ellie.
You don't know where she's bleeding from? Can't see
Ellie.
where the blood's coming from?
I think her head. I think she hit her head, but it's everywhere.
Okay, sir,
it's everywhere.
You think she might have fallen? Do you know what happened?
She may have slipped. There's blood on the table. Her face is a little purple.
Okay, hold on for rescue for her. Stay on the phone. What's wrong?
I went downstairs to go work out. I came back up. The door was latched. My fiance's inside. She wasn't answering. So after about a half hour, I decided to break it down. I see her now, just on the floor with blood. She's not responding.
Okay, is she breathing? Look at her chest. I need you to calm down, and I need you to look at her chest. It's really.
I really don't think she is.
Listen to me. Someone's on the way. Look at her chest. Is she flat on her back?
She's on her back. So I bring her.
Look at her chest and tell me if it's going up and down, up and down.
I don't see her moving.
Okay. Do you know how to do CPR?
I don't.
Okay, I can tell you what to do. Okay, until they get there. I want you to keep her flat on her.
God.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, okay.
Are you willing to do CPR with me over the phone until they get there?
I have to, right?
Okay, so get her flat on her back, bare her chest, okay? You want to rip her shirt off. Okay? You need to kneel down by her side.
Oh, my God. Ellie, please.
Listen, you can't freak out, sir, because you
Okay, I'm trying not to. Her shirt won't come off. It's a zipper. Oh, my God, she stabbed herself.
Where?
She fell with a knife. Oh, no, her knife's sticking out.
Her what?
There's a knife sticking out of her heart.
Oh, she stabbed herself?
I guess so. I don't know where she fell on it. I don't know.
Okay, well, don't touch it.
Okay, so I just let her down. Here now? I mean, what do I do?
No, I mean, you can't. If the knife is in her chest, it's going to be kind of hard for you to do CPR at this time.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Police, which operator? 277.
Is someone coming here?
Yes, they are. You said 4601 Flat Rock, right?
Yes.
Okay, someone's on the way.
Just to work out, and when I came back up, the door was latched.
Oh.
Like it was, it wasn't like it was, it was like locked from the inside. And I'm yelling, so I'm
was
yelling.
Your house broken into?
No.
So there's no sign of a break-in?
No sign of a break-in at all. I mean, there will be when you get here because I had to break the latch, but.
Okay, 4601.
John, by my estimation, you've been doing this, you're an active 911 dispatcher. You've been doing this for over 10 years. You probably have 10,000 plus 911 calls under your belt. What did Samuel Goldberg say on that 911 call? And what does an active 911 dispatcher hear in those words that the public has probably never thought about or never been told?
First, I want to compliment that dispatcher. Some people thought she might have been brutal, but she needed to take control of that situation, and she also hung on to the probability that it was a medical incident. She was reluctant to turn it over into a crime scene, so good job to her. Something that had to have stood out right away was the fact that he just went ahead and said she stabbed herself. This kind of implies an alibi for him from the get-go.
Bare her chest, okay? You want to rip her shirt off. Okay? You need to kneel down by her side.
Oh my God, Ellie, please.
Listen, you can't freak out, sir, because you
Okay, I'm trying not to. I'm trying not to. Her shirt won't come off. It's a zipper. Oh my God, she stabbed herself.
Where?
She fell on a knife. Oh no, her knife's sticking out.
Her what?
There's a knife sticking out of her heart.
Oh, she stabbed herself?
I guess so. I don't know where she fell on it. I don't know.
Okay, well, don't touch it.
There was nearly an hour of time that the fiance says that he arrived at the locked door in the moment he picked up the phone to dial 911. So you've worked these types of calls. You know what to listen for in something like this. It's not just what they say, it's how they say it. Is there anything else that stands out to you, like him not being under pressure, or, you know?
I would say the hugest thing is that he sort of establishes an alibi for himself while he's explaining everything that happened. Now, when people call 911, they tend to be very ready to tell their story. But when you come across gross physical trauma and the apparent murder or death of your loved one, the only thing that you should be thinking about is that other person, not where you're coming from and how you're looking at her now and seeing this and she fell on a knife and all these other plausible things. I would say that if the family heard this, the number one thing that they're going to hear and hate is that when she's encouraging him to do CPR, he says, you know, I suppose I have to, as though there's some sort of debate about whether or not you would take action to save the person you love.
Okay, do you know how to do CPR?
I don't.
Okay, I can tell you what to do, okay, until they get there. I want you to keep her flat.
Oh, God.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, okay.
Are you willing to do CPR with me over the phone until they get there?
I have to, right?
Okay.
I can say that I have taken plenty of 911 calls where people are hesitant to do CPR. They're afraid of doing it wrong. They're simply afraid to do it. I've known couples that were married 50 years, and one wouldn't do CPR on the other. I think most people would get in there and do that. The crime scene photos are too graphic to show on YouTube, but the gross physical trauma is also going to dissuade people from doing CPR. But just hearing that he's not completely interested in trying that. Finally, the knife sticking out of the chest is going to make CPR impossible, and the dispatcher recognizes that. She doesn't push back very hard when he says that she stabbed herself. Sometimes when we get clues that we're not being told the truth, we try not to be too confrontational about it. We know that the police are going to question them and get details on that.
You know, as they're talking to John, it's just free flowing. We did that Caleb Flynn episode a couple of weeks ago. We're working on another series of episodes in the Anthony Shea case where it's not even stream of consciousness 911, but they're, the conversation over 911, but they're telling the 911 dispatcher a whole lot of the story, the most revealing piece of evidence in the entire file, just because of the way he reacted on some of the things. But it's also some of the most confusing, to be honest. Like, I do think that there's a sense of calm that he has when he's talking on the phone. You know, from your years as a 911 dispatcher, as I know from my years too, people react to different things in different manners. And, you know, he could essentially be on autopilot. I mean, sometimes we're on autopilot. We don't believe what we're even hearing, let alone seeing. So
I think it's great that you mentioned Anthony Shea and Caleb Flynn. Those are two calls that we've handled on this show before. Those are both guys who are facing murder charges over the death of their loved one. They're suspected of murdering their wives or their girlfriends in respective cases. But you listen to those phone calls, and those phone calls are overplayed for theater. They're yelling, they're screaming, they're crying, especially in the case of Caleb Flynn. So if overdoing it, if being theatrical is a dead giveaway for someone's guilt, what do we make out of this call? You know, he's somewhat put together. You can't really have it both ways unless you really do give in to just everyone responds differently, and all of their responses, all of their emotional cues are all meaningless then. And they did it while they're responding to these things very differently. And I guess, Drew, I would have to ask you, you know, when you go to a scene like this, a scene of a crime, and someone's ready to tell you everything, what does that tell you that's not being said? Are they trying to control the narrative? Or are they trying to divert attention away from their criminal behavior? Or are they really just trying to be open and honest with you?
Let us know in the comments if you want to hear more 911 calls where it's impossible to guess whether you're talking to a suspect or somebody who's a true victim, because John just hit on something perfectly there. you're 100% right in the sense that you cannot have it both ways. What's the psychology behind how they're supposed to react? Like, what's the true measuring stick? And you would also think that if somebody is trying to control the narrative, or somebody is just trying to get the emergency response going so that it gets kind of like the monkey off their back because, say, they're the suspect, right? Why would they continue to talk over a recorded line? They know for a fact that, anybody that's watched any true crime, anybody that's watched the Comm Center knows that every good true crime story starts with a 911 call. So why would you keep talking to 911 and giving all this information and giving this free shot at an interview? No Miranda required, no nothing, just a free-flowing conversation. Why would you do that if you're a suspect? Because you're not going to convince a whole lot of people. I think Corey Richins tried to convince some people, and there's quite a bit of psychology behind it, I'm sure, but we are operational true crime. What I've noticed about our interactions with people in these videos is that we get a lot of people to stay a long time because they're intrigued by the stories that we tell, but a big chunk of them, John, are not subscribers. They're not subscribers.
If you like what you see, hit subscribe. Check out more videos from us.
So share with your friends and family if you want to see the real deal. I think what we need to understand is this is where the investigators show up, and we've got to pair what was said in the 911 call with what they're seeing on the scene. They're going to take into account the body position, and in this case, she was found seated against the lower kitchen cabinets. She had her head and shoulders resting against them. She wasn't supine on the floor. Supine would be just kind of laid back, laid out. Mm-hmm. She was leaned up against the thing. You even heard, John, the conversation where they were talking about, like, I don't know, maybe she slipped on something. She's, and that was consistent with what they saw. And the environmental context of this whole thing, it's there was some packed toiletries that were found. There was unfinished fruit preparation. So she had a knife out, right? That was on the kitchen counter. There were no valuables missing. There were no signs of a break-in. I think this is, quite the mysterious part of this whole thing. The door was latched from the inside, and this is kind of hard to do. And there were no break-ins in the windows or anything. There was no note found either. There was a boot tread imprint that was visible in the blood evidence, but it was given to somebody, like it was assigned to somebody. It wasn't. Yeah. And then the victim's cell phone was located in the bathroom. It was separated from the work laptops and stuff that were found in the apartment. So now the meeting between the medical examiner's office that took place was between the medical examiner that did the autopsy, the police department, detectives, the investigators, and the district attorney's office. They flipped the ruling from homicide to self-harm. What do you think the conversation was in that meeting?
Well, the photos are too grisly to show on YouTube. If you're looking at the angle, it looks forensically like that it's an upwards motion into her body instead of a downwards motion. If you're going towards someone and you've got a weapon in your hand and you're coming down and you're stabbing, that's a downwards motion. If you're holding the weapon in your hand and you're coming towards yourself, that's going to be an upwards motion. So they were probably just looking at that and the fact that Sam was walking around the building. He's on camera. He doesn't have any blood or anything that's obvious on him. They would have checked the bathroom pipes and things like that in the bathroom for any trace evidence to see if he cleaned himself up in there. Given how truly gruesome this was, like I said, we can't even show the photos on YouTube. And when people are stabbed in the head, especially, but also in the chest, they bleed profusely, and there was blood everywhere. That blood evidence is not going to disappear. And if you can't find any of that on Sam, then what that suggests is someone else who had a motive to commit what looks like a heat of the moment murder. It doesn't look pre-planned. The murder weapon was the kitchen tool that she was using to prepare fruit. So like, this isn't pre-planned. Someone didn't come in here and bring their own gun or weapon or whatever and leave with it. The murder weapon was a weapon of opportunity. So
Sam's statement was consistent with everything that was found there. It's not like these investigators were inept or they asked him the questions that were pertinent. This is a true locked door mystery. What else are they supposed to do? There were over 20 stab wounds or 20 stab wounds in the chest, the abdomen, in the posterior neck. and in the posterior scalp. So it's important to remember that if you see photos of these, or you see there's plenty of online representation of what these stab wounds look like and where they were, you'll notice that they don't drop below a certain point in her back.
Before you move on, though, it's important to mention that, they say that she was stabbed 20 times, and that phraseology is what gives people the idea that it was a frenzied attack. A lot of these lacerations on her body are not very deep. They're not all fatal wounds. In fact, probably only 1 or 2 of them are. And so it's important to mention that, the idea that it's 20 wounds, a lot of these are minor lacerations. The hesitation wounds, superficial lacerations that wouldn't cause her death. So it's important to remember that, even though she's got this many and it kind of speaks to a frenzied attack, not all of them are fatal wounds.
And the fact that she was in a locked door and there was no other suspect that they were looking at, the hesitation wounds, the depth of some of the wounds, it would be hard to try and convict somebody for a homicide with those conditions. Like there's beyond reasonable doubt built in towards her self-harm, right? It's not, it would be like a near impossible task, pending or, barring other evidence to come forward that either he's responsible or somebody else is responsible. And by the way, I think a lot of people just make the leap that he's the one that called 911. He was the boyfriend, so obviously he's the suspect, but that's not necessarily true either.
But what you just said there was really, really important. So right now, the prosecutor's office, even the medical examiner, maybe the police, they believe that right now, if they took this case in front of a jury, they're worried that the jury would see reasonable doubt. In other words, the prosecution can't meet its burden to get a conviction. I think that's a reasonable prosecution to not just haul someone into court and say, well, this is what we got and see if it sticks to the wall. Because if he is responsible, and they don't have the evidence right now, if they proceed against this man and he's acquitted, that's it. They can never go after him again. There's a little thing called double jeopardy. You can't twice be put in danger for the same crime. They can't just charge him again and then again. So if more evidence were to come out at some point, they wouldn't be able to use that in any subsequent trial because no trial would take place. Like look at O.J. Simpson. Okay, the guy was acquitted. Well, he was convicted in the civil trial, and that kind of suggests that there was enough evidence there that he may have did it. Certainly people checked their guts and thought that he did it. But suppose some piece of evidence came out after he was acquitted. He would have never been charged again, folks. And so when you know that you can't make the case, it's reckless and irresponsible as a prosecutor to just go ahead and try. And so some people are frustrated that charges haven't been brought against him. But, at this point, the option is always open for them to proceed against him, Drew.
Yeah, even take a step back from that because I think that the medical examiner is also a little concerned about me changing this from homicide to self-harm is a protection of the system in a sense, because he has to go with what the body says. He can't go with what the prosecutor wants or what the people are looking for, right? He's got to look at the evidence. He's got to look at everything. He's got to look at the body, itself, the autopsy results, and he's got to look, compare that to what's at the scene. So if he just, I guess, throws out a notion that this was a homicide without taking into account that, like, investigation years and years later, the family is still fighting, because the official ruling concluded that despite the quantity and placement of the wounds to the neck and the back of the head, the victim retained motor function to finish all the other wounds. But there's also a consensus of independent investigators who looked at what the medical examiner looked at, and they say that, if she had nicked a little piece of her spine and which was present, that her fine motor skills would have been gone. So she would not have been able to do that. So again, we're like, here we are battling over whether she could or she couldn't have done it. So what is the safe ruling? Is it self-harm? Is it homicide? I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, I think just going back to 10,000 foot view, when people first encounter this case and then they hear about it and then, that she was stabbed over 20 times, it just defies credibility right away, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't take a closer look at it and figure out if it's scientifically possible. Put the Mythbusters on the case. Considering how many homicides and completed acts of self-harm happen in this country, you're bound to get a statistical outlier at some point, and this is it. This is the one that has captured the attention of people, because the claim so far is, and right now, for the record, that this was an act of self-harm, that somehow a woman injured herself with a knife 20 times. You just can't believe it. But right now, that's what they say, and people want to believe that it's something else. Drew, I'm sure you can say as a police officer that no family is ready to believe that their loved one has done themselves in. They have, especially people who are suffering from depression and anxiety, often they could put on a public face or a persona of functionality, and then they're suffering in private. I've known someone in my life whose sudden passing by his own hand was shocking. And it was because none of us had any idea what was going on in his life. And so none of us were ready to believe that. In his case, there wasn't 20 stab wounds, so we didn't have anything to latch onto. But I think in Ella's case, this is what they're latching onto for the core of their disbelief, that no one could do this, that she wouldn't do it. And that's why there has to be something wrong.
You'd be very surprised. Like, I know her. She would never do this. Maybe you didn't know that part of her, or maybe there was just something wrong medically, or maybe something, the chemicals in her brain made her do something, or maybe there was an accident, or, it could be a lot of things. So you're right in that sense that, people just, no one is willing to accept self-harm or self-deletion. It's I won't say no one, because, some people leave a note or whatever. It's very hard convincing people. It's very hard convincing people, family members of people that have left notes and have died with guns in their hand, from gunshot wounds to the head. It's very difficult to convince somebody of that. And I totally get that. I completely empathize with somebody's feeling and loss and their grief. But there are times also that you've got to face facts. And it's not even to be callous. It's just to kind of like, it's just a very sticky and intense situation.
Well, Drew, if people don't want to believe it, and in situations when it's straightforward, I'm sure you can understand why in this most outrageous case, why they would not believe it. I think one thing right there is in the 911 phone call, when the dispatcher says, are there any signs of forced entry? She's asking essentially the first question for the crime scene text. Is this attack? Is this the second act after a burglary? Or should we be looking for someone who's still in the area? And one thing here that we have to look at is the broken latch. Now, he said that you can expect to find this. He has a whole story about how he forgot his key. He had to return to the apartment. He asked for the doorman to help him get in. The doorman refused. He eventually had to force that door.
So the investigative theory on the door latch is, if the swing latch is engaged from the inside, that forced entry by an intruder is physically impossible. And that's what a lot of this hinged on, no pun intended. But the forensic reality is that the door latch was found incompletely detached from the door. So when pushed from the outside, a neighbor noted that the latch was reverberating and making a noise. So that brings the core question. Does the damage indicate that a latch that was forced open from the outside, or is it, just a latch that was manipulated to simulate from inside the room already? So in the initial premise, the early MEO report, there was a statement from the apartment security man that was reportedly present. And he said that he witnessed the fiance forced entry into the locked apartment. And this corroborated the timeline of the locked state of the door. It corroborated Samuel's statement. Then they started pulling video, and there were other independent investigators involved. And come to find out, the guy's name is Philip Hanton. He's the building concierge. He's a security guard, however you want to characterize him. But he swore under oath that he didn't escort the fiance to the 6th floor, that he did not witness the door being broken down, and he didn't accompany the forced entry. So this is where the story starts to collapse in a sense. Not necessarily, though, that it points to guilt. It's just that the original investigation depended on this. The medical examiner made their ruling after being talked to by the police and the district attorney based on all of this. Then later on in life, come to find out that's not exactly what happened. I don't know. Can 20 stab wounds, including 10 to the back of the head, be self-inflicted? I guess is a whole separate other question that we should probably delve into in the next episode, because there are some heavy hitting forensic pathologists that, very famous ones, by the way, that say that that's biomechanically inconsistent with the human motor function. That the blood is also going to tell its own story, like the horizontal flow across the face and all of that defying gravity, pointing her head. It kind of points to her head being repositioned, not necessarily. So maybe even staged. But if he didn't have blood on his hands, then who's got the blood on their hands?
Yeah, blood always tells a story. You could tell so much about the angle. You could tell the speed and the height, especially. You can learn a lot from that. Blood just doesn't go away. If it's on your hands or whatever, if it's on your clothes, and if you were a part of an attack like that, you're going to have bloody clothes somewhere. If he never left the building, and if they searched the apartment while they were there, they would have found something. So I think that's one major thing in his favor that few people discuss. But as for other evidence, we're going to break that down in our next episode. The evidence that people claim the police ignored, we're going to go through it. We're going to see what's relevant, what's not relevant, and what's a different story that it could tell maybe than the mainstream media.
Yeah, part 2 of the series is going to go inside the forensic pathology. We're going to talk about the heavy hitters. We're going to put their findings next to the medical examiner's conclusions and let you see exactly where they diverge and why that divergence matters in a court of law. The neuropathology debate is one of the most consequential arguments, even more than the door latch and the 911 call probably. Part 2 is going to drop next week. Part 3 is going to come after that.
911 emergency, police or paramedics.
He's going westbound on foot. Westbound on foot.